A man screamed at her in front of a packed dining room. "Lose £20 or you're fired!" The whole restaurant went silent. Then a low voice cut through the dark, calm, lethal. The kind men obey before they understand why. "Who," asked the most feared boss in Chicago, "told you that you could speak to her like that?" The dinner rush at Cardella's was a controlled storm, and Maeve Donnelly was the eye of it. She moved through the River North dining room, the way a current moves through stone. Quiet, certain, impossible to fight. 42 covers in her section, 3 of them whales who tipped in hundreds, and she carried every order in her head without a notepad. Table 9 wanted the Branzino off menu with no capers. Table 4 was a divorce in progress and needed slow, careful timing. Table 11 was a man who'd been nursing the same Barolo for 90 minutes and watching the door like he expected it to come for him. Maeve noticed things. She always had. Faces, debts, the small tells people thought they hid. It was the one talent nobody had ever paid her for. What they paid her for, supposedly, was being invisible while being perfect. And for 8 months at Cardella's she had been both, until Gavin Hollis took over as floor manager. Gavin was 31, gym-built, and rotten in the way of men who had been handsome enough that no one ever made them be kind. He had decided within his first week that Maeve was a problem, not because she was slow. She was the fastest server on the floor, not because guests complained. They asked for her by name. Because she was a size 16 woman in a restaurant Gavin wanted to fill with the kind of staff that matched the marble. He'd started small, schedule cuts. The worst tables, comments about the brand and the optics, murmured just loud enough. Tonight he stopped murmuring. It happened at the pass, but the dining room heard all of it. Maeve had flagged that Table 6's allergy ticket was wrong. Shellfish, not nuts, a mistake that could have killed a guest. And Gavin, humiliated to be corrected by her in front of the line cooks, snapped like a wire pulled too tight. "You know what your problem is?" His voice climbed and heads turned. "You think you're indispensable. You're a liability. Look at you." He gestured at her, a sweep of his hand that took in everything. "Lose £20 or you're fired. I mean it. The customers don't want to be served by that. £20 or clean out your locker." The room went still in that specific, awful way. Forks paused over plates. A woman at table 2 put her hand over her mouth. Maeve felt the heat crawl up her neck, felt 8 months of swallowed comments rise into her throat, and she did what she always did. She held. She kept her face flat. She would not give him the gift of her tears in front of 40 strangers. It was table 11 who broke the silence, the man with the Barolo. He set his glass down with a sound that was somehow louder than Gavin's shouting had been, a small, deliberate click of crystal on linen, and he stood. He was not a large man, but the room rearranged itself around him as he rose, the way a room does around weather. "Who?" he said, and his voice was almost gentle. "Told you that you could speak to her like that?" Gavin laughed, the nervous bark of someone who has not yet understood the size of his mistake. "Sir, this is a staff matter, if you'll just—" Dominic Falcone. The name landed in the room like a dropped tray. Maeve watched it move across faces. The maitre d's gone white, the sommelier suddenly very interested in his shoes, 2 men at the bar who had been eating quietly now sitting up very straight, hands drifting toward their jackets. She knew the name too. Everyone in Chicago who read a newspaper or kept their ear to the wrong ground knew the name. The Falcone crew ran half the loan paper and 3/4 of the protection from the loop to Cicero. Federal prosecutors had been trying to put Dominic Falcone in a cage for 9 years and had managed to convict exactly no one. There were stories. There were always stories. Most of them ended with someone disappearing. "That's my name," Dominic went on, walking now, unhurried, until he stood between Maeve and the manager. "And this is my restaurant. I bought Cardella's 11 months ago, through 3 companies you've never heard of, which is why your owner's check's clear, and your owner has never met me. So when you scream at my staff in my dining room about her body, you're not running your floor. You're insulting my house." Gavin's mouth opened and closed. "You're fired," Dominic said. "Get your coat. Don't take anything that isn't yours. And if I ever hear that you've said one word about this woman to anyone, in any bar, on any night, I will know, and I will be very disappointed." He turned, just slightly, toward the 2 men at the bar, and they stood as one. "Walk him out." They walked him out. Maeve realized she had not taken a breath in nearly a minute. When she did, it shook. Dominic Falcone turned to face her, and for the first time she saw his eyes properly. Dark, tired, scarred at the edges by a life that had not been kind, and fixed on her with an intensity that should have frightened her, and somehow did not. "I'm sorry you had to hear that in front of people," he said. Quiet now, just for her. "It won't happen again. Finish your section if you want to, or go home. You're paid either way. And Maeve," he knew her name. She hadn't told him her name. "Table 11 would like the check, and he'd like to know your last name, if you'll give it. Only if you want to." She gave it to him. She didn't know why. Donnelly. Something crossed his face. Recognition, or the ghost of it. "Donnelly," he repeated, as if filing it somewhere permanent. Of course it is. She did not understand that last part until much later. By then it was far too late to walk away. For 3 days nothing happened, and Maeve almost let herself believe it had been a strange dream. The restaurant ran smoother without Gavin. The interim manager, a nervous woman named Patrice, treated Maeve with a deference that bordered on fear, which Maeve found both gratifying and unsettling. Her schedule filled back out. A check arrived for a scheduling adjustment that was 3 times what she was owed. On the 4th day, a car was waiting outside her apartment in Logan Square. Not a threatening car. A clean black sedan, a driver who got out and opened the rear door and said, "Miss Donnelly, Mr. Falcone wondered if you'd have lunch. You're free to say no. I'm to tell you that specifically. You're free to say no, and I'll drive away." Maeve stood on the cracked itterwalk in her coat, her breath fogging in the cold, and considered the size of the thing she was being offered a door into. She should have said no. Every reasonable cell in her body said no. The man ran a criminal organization. People who got close to men like that ended up in newspapers or under them. But Maeve Donnelly had spent her whole life being the woman people decided things about. The woman who was too much or not enough. The woman who held her face flat and swallowed it. And here was the most dangerous man in the city, who had stood up in a crowded room and made the world go quiet on her behalf. And he had said, "You're free to say no." She found she did not want to. "Just lunch," she said. "Just lunch," the driver agreed. He took her to a townhouse in the Gold Coast, the kind of address that doesn't advertise. Dominic was waiting in a kitchen that was warmer and more lived in than she'd expected. Copper pans, a worn wooden table, the smell of garlic and good olive oil. He was cooking. The sleeves of his shirt were pushed up, and his forearms were a map of old scars he made no effort to hide. "I cook when I think," he said, not turning around. "Sit, it's nothing fancy. Cacio e pepe and a salad. My grandmother's pepper. My own bad temper. You could have just had the restaurant send something. I could have. I didn't want you served. I wanted to feed you. He set a plate in front of her, and she noticed his hands were careful, almost shy, in a way the rest of him was not. There's a difference. She ate. It was, infuriatingly, the best pasta she had ever had. They talked. About nothing, at first. The city, the cold, a book she'd been reading. He was funny in a dry, unexpected way. He listened the way few people listened, with his whole attention as if she were the only signal in a room full of noise. And the whole time, some part of Maeve's sharp, noticing mind was cataloguing what didn't fit. He knew her name before she'd given it. He'd said, "Of course it is," when she told him Donnelly. He had bought a struggling restaurant 11 months ago, right around the time she'd been hired, through shell companies, and had been sitting at table 11 on the exact night Gavin chose to break. "You've been watching me," she said. She put her fork down. "Haven't you? This isn't the first night you've been at that table." Dominic went still. To his credit, he didn't lie. "No," he said. "It isn't the first night." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into the drawer of the worn table and slid a photograph across the wood toward her. Old, creased, the colors gone soft. A man in his 40s, dark-haired, smiling in front of a hardware store with a hand-painted sign. Maeve's chest tightened. "That's my father, Sean Donnelly," Dominic said softly. "He ran a hardware shop in Bridgeport, and for 9 years he washed money for my father's organization through that shop, and nobody knew, because he was the most honest-looking man in Chicago, and the books he kept were a work of art. He had a gift for numbers, your father, for seeing the whole shape of a thing at once." He met her eyes. "You have it too. I watched you carry 40 orders in your head. I watched you catch an allergy ticket that would have put a man in the hospital. You see everything. You got it from him. My father died when I was 12. Her voice came out harder than she meant. "Car accident. On the Dan Ryan. It wasn't an accident." The kitchen seemed to drop away. Maeve heard her own pulse. "Your father found something he wasn't supposed to find," Dominic continued, "and there was no cruelty in it, only the flat weight of an old grief carried a long way. A skim. Men inside my father's organization stealing from the families they were supposed to protect, and laundering the theft through legitimate shops like your dad's, without his knowledge. When Sean Donnelly understood what he was being made part of, he didn't run and he didn't take a cut. He started writing it all down. Names, dates, the whole shape of it. He was going to bring it to my father directly, because he believed, God help him, he was right, that the boss didn't know. He never got the chance. The men who were stealing got to him first, on the Dan Ryan. Maeve's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to stop them. "I was 19, Dominic said. "I idolized your father. He was the only straight man in a crooked world, and he treated me like I might grow up to be decent, which no one else did. When he died, I swore I'd find what he found and finish it. It took me 20 years, because the men who killed him got powerful. They run a faction now. They call themselves clean. They have judges. And they don't know that Sean Donnelly's daughter has the same gift he had, or that I've spent the last 11 months making sure she was somewhere I could watch over her." He leaned forward. "I didn't come to that restaurant to flirt with a waitress, Maeve. I came because there are men in this city who murdered your father, and if they ever learn who you are and what you can do, they'll finish what they started. I bought Cardella's to keep you close and safe. I was content to do it from a distance, forever, and never tell you any of this. and then a fool with a clipboard screamed at you about your body in front of 40 people, and I found that I could not stay in my chair. A muscle worked in his jaw. So now you know. You're free to say no. To all of it. But I needed you to understand that when I stood up in that room, it wasn't pity. It was the closest thing I've felt to that man in 20 years. Looking back at me out of your eyes. For a long time, Maeve said nothing. The pasta cooled between them. She thought about her father's hands, careful over a ledger at the kitchen table. She thought about the funeral, the closed casket, her mother's face. She thought about every man who had ever looked at her and seen only her size, and the one sitting across from her now who had looked and seen her father's gift. "The men who killed him," she said at last, and her voice did not shake any more. "You said I have the same eyes, the same gift." She held his gaze. "Then you didn't come here to protect me, Dominic?" "Not really. You came because you need me. You've been trying to finish my father's work for 20 years, and you can't, because you can't see the shape of it the way he could." She tapped her own temple, once. "But I can." Dominic Falcone, the most feared man in Chicago, who had emptied a dining room with 2 words, looked at her like a man watching a door open onto something he had stopped letting himself want. "Yes," he admitted. "That too." Maeve picked her fork back up. "Then we should probably talk about who I'm looking for," she said, "because I'm not losing 20 pounds, and I'm not letting them get away with it either." The list was in Maeve's head within a week. She didn't write it down. Her father's lesson, learned second-hand. Paper can be found, hands can be searched, but no one yet had invented a warrant for the inside of a skull. Dominic gave her everything. Ledgers from the shell companies. 2 decades of skim that had been buried under fake renovations and ghost suppliers. A faction inside the Falcone organization that called itself the Provident Group and presented to the world as a chain of check-cashing storefronts and a property management firm in Oak Park. Clean men. Donors to the right campaigns. The kind of criminals who had learned to look like the people who arrest criminals. For 3 weeks they worked at the worn wooden table in the Gold Coast, late into the nights, and Maeve did the thing she had never been paid to do. She saw the shape of it. "It's not the storefronts," she said one night, pushing a stack of statements aside. "Everyone keeps looking at the storefronts because that's where the cash moves. But cash is loud. Whoever ran this for 20 years is quiet. Look, every one of these properties was bought the same year a Provident storefront opened in the same neighborhood, and then sold 18 months later at a loss. Nobody loses on Chicago real estate 18 months running unless they want to. They're not laundering through the stores. They're laundering through the losses. The stores are theater." She tapped the page. "Find me who signed the property deeds, and you'll find the man who killed my father." Dominic stared at this page for a long moment. Then he laughed. A real laugh, startled out of him. 20 years, he said. 20 years and a man with 3 forensic accountants, and you found it in 3 weeks at my kitchen table. "My father found it faster," Maeve said. "He just didn't have anyone to tell. Something passed between them then. Not the heat of it, though that had been building for weeks, in the way his hand lingered when he passed her coffee, in the way she'd started staying long after the work was done. Something quieter and more dangerous. Trust. The most expensive thing either of them owned. He reached across the table and very gently turned her hand palm up, tracing the lines of it, the way he'd traced the ledgers. "When this is finished," he said, "I want there to be an after, for you, whatever it looks like, with me or without me. But an after." He looked up. "Men in my world don't get those. I've made my peace with that. I haven't made my peace with you not getting one. And if I want the after to have you in it, Maeve heard herself say. Dominic Falcone, who had ordered men into the river without changing his expression, looked away first. Then God help us both, he said, because the men who took your father will take anything I love to get to me. That's the price of standing next to me, Maeve. I won't pretend it isn't. I've been paying prices for being myself my whole life, she said. At least this one I'm choosing. She closed the distance and kissed him. He kissed her back, like a man who had been holding his breath for 20 years. The deed records named a man called Russell Crane. He was a fixture of respectable Chicago, a real estate attorney with an office on LaSalle, a seat on a hospital board, a wife who chaired galas. He had been, 20 years ago, a young associate in the law firm the Falcone organization used to paper its legitimate businesses. He had been the one who handled Sean Donnelly's hardware shop accounts. He had been, Maeve realized as the shape clicked fully into place, the one person her father would have trusted enough to bring his discovery to first, a respectable lawyer, an outsider, surely safe. Sean Donnelly had carried his evidence to Russell Crane, and Russell Crane had carried Sean Donnelly to the Dan Ryan. He's been promoted, Maeve said, her voice hollow. For 20 years, on my father's blood. He runs the Provident Group now. He's the quiet man. Dominic's face had gone to stone, the dining room stillness, but worse, colder, final. I'll handle it, he said. No. Maeve stood. I want to be there when you do. I want him to see whose eyes are looking at him when it ends. They moved on a Thursday, because Dominic said Thursdays were when Crane visited the Oak Park property office alone, a habit 20 years deep, the one careless thread in a careful man, the same arrogance that had let him scream at a waitress dressed as a clipboard. Maeve recognized it. Men who believed themselves untouchable always developed a routine, but the noticing mind that had found the truth in the ledgers had noticed something else in the weeks of working close to Dominic's crew. A second careless thread. And it did not belong to Russell Crane. It belonged to Dominic's own underboss, a man named Tobias Reyes, who had been with the Falcone organization for 19 years, who Dominic trusted like a brother, and who, Maeve had seen it in the small tells she'd been reading off faces since she was a child, had gone very still and very pale the night she identified Russell Crane by name. Not surprised, afraid. The fear of a man hearing his own secret spoken aloud by someone who didn't yet know it was his. She understood it on the drive to Oak Park, all at once, the whole shape of it dropping into place like a key. "Stop the car," she said. Dominic looked at her. "It's Tobias," she said. "He's the inside man. He always was. The Provident Group needed someone inside the family to make sure no one ever looked too hard. Someone to steer your father away when he got close. Someone to steer you away for 20 years. Crane is the quiet money, but Tobias is the reason you never found it. Think, Dominic. Every dead end you ever hit. Who walked you into it? Who told you the trail had gone cold? Who knew we'd be here today, on a Thursday, alone?" She watched the truth crater across his face. "We're not driving to an ambush of Russell Crane. We're driving into one." The first shot came through the windshield 3 seconds later. What happened after that, Maeve would only ever remember in fragments. Dominic's arm slamming across her chest, driving her down into the footwell. The sedan's reinforced glass spiderwebbing but holding. The driver, Dominic's man, returning fire through the open window. The screech of the car, reversing at speed down a residential Oak Park street, while men in a parked van leaned out with rifles. And Dominic, bleeding from a graze along his temple, calm as still water, pulling a phone from his coat and making one call. "It's done," he said into it. "She made you. We're alive. Which means the only question left is whether you'd like to be." A pause. "No, not Crane. I already have Crane. I had him a week ago. Crane gave you up the moment I sat him down. You really thought I'd drive my woman into Oak Park on a Thursday without knowing exactly who set the table." Another pause. Longer. Maeve, pressed into the footwell with her heart slamming, understood that she had been right, and that Dominic had been one step ahead of her being right, and that the trap had been a trap inside a trap all along. "Goodbye, Tobias." He ended the call. The rifle fire had stopped. The van was gone. In the silence, Maeve climbed back into the seat, shaking, furious, alive. "You knew. You let me figure it out, and you already knew." "I suspected," Dominic said, wiping blood from his eye with the back of his hand. "I needed to be sure, and I needed him to commit to the move where I could see it. I'm sorry. I will spend the rest of my life being sorry I put you in that car. But I needed the man who helped kill your father to reach for you in the open, so that everything that comes after is clean. So no one can ever say it was anything but what it was." He looked at her, and the stone was gone, and underneath it was something raw. "It's finished now, Maeve. Both of them. Crane will give the state everything in exchange for his life. 20 years of the Provident Group, the murder, all of it. Tobias won't be giving anyone anything. Your father's work is done." He was right. He was always right, and the whole city is going to know his name was Sean Donnelly, and that he died honest. Maeve sat in the bullet-scarred car and wept. For the father she'd lost at 12. For the 12-year-old who'd been told it was an accident. For every year she'd spent being made smaller by smaller people. And Dominic Falcone, the most feared man in Chicago, held her without a word, getting blood in her hair, and did not tell her to stop. The Provident Group collapsed within a month. Russell Crane took a deal and a sell. The papers ran Sean Donnelly's photograph, the one in front of the hardware store, smiling, and called him the honest man who'd brought down a syndicate from beyond the grave. Maeve framed it. She never lost the £20. She did, however, lose the job. She quit Cardella's the following spring, because Dominic, who had been quietly going legitimate for years and now had reason to finish the job, asked her to do something he could not do himself, to take her father's gift and put it to honest work. She runs the books now, all of them. Every clean enterprise the Falcone name still touches, and there are more of those every year, because the woman who can see the whole shape of a thing at once decided the shape was going to be lawful, or it wasn't going to exist. She is the most feared accountant in Chicago. Men who once screamed at waitresses about their bodies now wait, sweating, in her outer office, hoping she'll approve their loans. And every night she goes home to a worn wooden table in the Gold Coast, where a dangerous man cooks his grandmother's cacio e pepe and listens to her with his whole attention, as if she is the only signal in a room full of noise. £20. Imagine measuring a woman like that in pounds. If this story moved you, if you cheered when Dominic stood up in that silent dining room, if you felt every year of Maeve's strength, then do something for her right now. Hit that like button so more people hear her story. Drop a comment and tell us, would you have gotten in that car? Share this with someone who needs to remember their worth was never measured in pounds. And subscribe, because next time the underworld has an even darker secret waiting. Don't keep her waiting. Click subscribe now.